what we have here is the 22 horsepower INTEK VTWIN that came out of the 2003 Craftsman LT2000. Like I said in the last video, when I originally got this motor, the block was destroyed. I ended up having to rebuild it. Here's a picture of the block previously. As you can tell, there was no repairing this. Even if this wasn't there, as you can see right here, it was beginning to crack. So you know, I still wouldn't have been able to use this. Another issue when the connecting rods exploded was, I don't know if you could see the bend in that, but it took pretty good force to be able to do that. Luckily, I didn't have any issues with the pistons. They were still inside the cylinders. They were scuffed up a little bit, probably from when the connecting rods shattered. Might have shot this way, pieces this way into the cylinder where the pistons were, and scoured them up a little bit, but they weren't bad. I didn't have any issues as far as when I was assembling this with the new block and new connecting rods. So I just reused the pistons. As far as everything else goes on this motor, what I had to replace, as you know, was the connecting rods. There was this piston, one of the rings on it was had snapped off. I don't know if that had happened if someone else tried to take it out and just put the piston in wrong, or you know, just because of the what happened in there. So I ended up having to replace. I ended up replacing both sets of piston rings, connecting rods, new head gaskets on both sides. I mean, the head gaskets were fine, but you know, I already had it apart, so I decided to just do that anyway. Got a new sump gasket and the new camshaft. Luckily, all these parts were relatively inexpensive, and you know, it was pretty easy to disassemble and put back together. You know, with the winter months, you know, it gives me something to do, and it was fairly simple. You know, it took me a couple of weeks. You know, I kind of took my time on it. I still have to, and I didn't do this when I had it apart, was to clean the carburetor. When I had it apart, everything looked good in it. There wasn't any debris down inside. But I didn't check the float bowl or anything. So before I install this back into the Craftsman LT2000, I'm going to take the carburetor off. I'm going to clean that and get that back together. Right now I'm going to take it apart and so we can get better access to the carburetor. The thing I gotta say though is I love these engines. They're just so beefy, and you know, if I didn't have a tractor to put this in, I'd probably wait for something really old, like an old Murray steel frame. Pop this thing in there. That would be something though, wouldn't it? I need a 3/8. Got 6 bolts you gotta take off. 3/8 size. Really simple. They just hold the engine cover on. When I get the cover off, I'll get you in here so you can see the inside underneath the cover. You don't have to take them all the way out. They got notches in them in the cover that the bolts just sit in. So really all you got to do is get them almost out and then just lift the cover up. Sometimes you got to take this off too, because you could have a bolt or a screw inside to hold this down. It's usually attached right to the top, right to the carburetor. Okay, there's the filter. It's not bad. Probably just gonna reuse it. Alright, nothing there. I'm gonna take it off. That's all it is, plastic cover. Nothing special. I mean, it's got a pre-filter in here. You know, it helps save the life of your regular filter that sits over. Here's the inside of the INTEK VTWIN without the cover. And overall pretty good shape. You know, like I said before, I haven't cleaned the carburetor yet. This will look totally different once I get it off and cleaned up. Big important thing to understand, when mowers sit out in the wintertime and stuff, you get mouse nests in here and they clog up the cooling fins. And a lot of people don't realize is once those get clogged, you know, your engine can't cool off properly. Then it overheats and you know, it could warp the heads. And next thing you know, you're burning oil, wondering where all that smoke is coming from. So it's really important to make sure, like down in there, and you know, these fins right here, clean them out with a toothbrush or a pick of some sort. Get all that grease and debris out. You know, you might be leaking oil, and you know, when the thing is running, you know, right there is where the head mounts to the block. So you know, you could get blow by right there, and you have oil all over the inside, and then you get the grass, and then, you know, in the winter time you got mice in there building their nests, and that's all in there. And depending on where you live, you might have a wasp nest in there. You know, over time this stuff clears, you know, clogs everything up, and your motor's not going to run the way that it's supposed to, or cool off the way that it's supposed to. But overall, this is pretty good condition. You know, the ignition coils look good. You know, there's no cracks or, you know, marks of any sort on those. So whoever had, you know, this motor prior to me, with the exception of the block, you know, took, you know, pretty good care of it, I can assume. I mean, you can tell that oil filter isn't the right one. I just kind of put it on there temporarily so mice or, you know, bugs don't get in there. You know, because, you know, I'm in my basement right now, and, you know, this is where this is probably going to stay for probably until March. So, you know, we're going to work on getting the carburetor off now. On both the carburetors, 3/8 as well. Get away with using, you know, socket. Sometimes, you know, you can also use a torch bit, but these work, you know, all the same. Get up here underneath. Sometimes the thing's on a weird angle and you can't get a socket in there. So, you know, I use a small one. I don't use a deep well. Then I won't have a problem. With the exception of the sump gasket, I hand tighten everything. You know, the valve covers. I definitely make sure that all the mating surfaces are clean, so when you put everything back together, you know it's tight and you won't get any oil leaks either out of the valve cover or air seeping in through the intake. And you wonder why your engine isn't running right. I got all the bolts off of that. I got to disconnect the harness to the fuel shut-off solenoid. Now we got to work on disconnecting the fuel line. So now we can work on getting the throttle off. Oh, we got this breather hose back here. Don't forget that. You're wondering why the thing ain't coming apart. I think it's back there. Once that comes off, and you got a lot more maneuverability. You can just get in here and figure out which way this is snagged on, usually like that, and come right off. And there's the carburetor and intake. I like the metal ones a lot better than the plastic. So there it is with the carburetor off. And I'm going to take this bracket off right here and clean this up. Get the debris and gunk off of that as well. You know, just remember to, you know, if you have to, take pictures of the way this is set up so you know how it goes back together. You know, the worst thing is you go put it all back together and you got these linkages crisscrossed, and you start it up and it won't run at all, or just run wide open because this linkage is connected to the governor. So it's always important to make sure you know how you took it apart, so that when you go put it back together, you can won't have any issues. Well, here's that carburetor. I'm going to take off this part of the intake, 7/16. 2 bolts hold it on. I'm glad I took it off. Quite dirty. Two nuts and 2 studs hold this whole carburetor on. Once you get this part of the intake off, as you can tell, quite dirty. So we're gonna put that in my little cleaning bin, so I know when to clean it. Got a gasket here. I'm gonna try and take this off as delicately as possible. I'd like to reuse it. Looks like it's in really good shape. Once I get it off, I'll check, see if it's, you know, flat and dried out, which I believe it is. Someone who previous owner must have replaced these at one point, so we'll set that aside so we don't lose it. Now we have these two studs right here, the whole carburetor assembly on. So before you take those out, you have your choke lever right here. I'm going to take this out, so you'll be able to, when you get those studs out, you can remove that. You won't have to sit here and fight with this rod that's connected here. It should be 5/16. Now I'm not using a drill to get any of these off, because, you know, it's bad practice. You know, you start using a drill or an impact wrench, next thing you know, you're stripping bolts and nuts, and it's good practice to, especially on the small stuff, do everything with a socket, with a hand wrench. Make sure you keep your hardware in a nice open space so you don't forget it or lose it. And there's the choke lever. Again, like I was saying before, make sure when you're taking stuff apart, you know how it goes back together. So you don't want to, you know, this rod, you know, go in two different ways. So I'll put that in, clean that up as well. Alright, so now got this carburetor ready to come off, and you got these two studs held on by Torx. So figure out what size it is here. Now it should be on there relatively hard. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to get off. I'm using a 4mm to get them off. Yeah, this one wasn't even on tight. Neither was that one. Now, I could have done it by hand. It's just one stud, just like that. You got your other one right here. And the whole carburetor should come right off. Make sure you keep an eye on, you know, these. You got the spacer right here. You go to put this back together without the spacer, you know, things aren't going to line up. There's the carburetor. You know, doesn't look bad. You know, it's a little dirty right there, obviously. This is part of the spacing towards the engine. So, set that aside over here for a second here. Got this gasket on both sides of that spacer. So when you take it off, you know, sometimes these gaskets fall right off if you're not paying attention, and go put it back together, and you put it on without the gasket, and you're gonna get air leaks. You'll be sucking in air. I'm trying to get this off as gently as possible. I want to reuse it. All the gaskets are in really good shape, so, you know, I'm going to reuse what I can. If I have to replace something, I will. So, you know, that's ready to be cleaned. I'll put that in my cleaning bin. And back at the carburetor again. Try and get this gasket off. Again, gently. And you can bend it a little bit. I mean, they're, you know, paper gaskets, so they get a little bit of flexibility to them. So you want to try, you want to be gentle either way. I mean, you don't want to have to buy just one gasket, you know, or it's just, I mean, you can technically make your own, but you got to, just easier to take your time, you know, work it. This one's on pretty good, so I might have to just replace this one. But usually when I find out if I got to replace a gasket, yeah, this one's alright. I mean, you can tell. I mean, I'm stuck on there a little bit. You can tell right in there. I don't know if someone put some RBT on there. It's kind of hard to tell. We'll set that aside. So I cleaned up the carburetor. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of it, but it got cleaned up pretty good, considering the way it was. This is the original carburetor. I'm glad that it still had the original on it. I don't really like getting a mower and then having a cheap knockoff, you know, and sometimes it's a kind of a hit and miss with carburetors. You know, you can get a cheap knockoff and that's good, but then you can also get a cheap knockoff that's bad and it won't run right. And it never dawns on you that it's the carburetor, you know. And maybe you clean the carburetor and you've done everything you could possibly think of and it still won't run right, you know. Chances are, you know, if it's not a, you know, a valve problem or something along those lines, chances are, you know, your carburetor's not the original and you got a Chinese knockoff and, you know, it's either different size and, or, you know, maybe this fuel inlet, you know, is coming straight out or it's coming from the top or, you know, maybe, you know, it could be anything really. I mean, I like the originals, the original Nicky carbs. I like those. Good quality. So after cleaning everything up, as you can tell, compared to what it was, looks really good. You know, I'm happy with it. Same with the intake. You know, just a little cleaning. I mean, you already have it apart. If you're doing the carburetor, why not, you know, clean it up a little bit? You know, it'll last you a lot longer. You know, and you'll be able to see when you're working on. You know, it's you know, I'm trying to get it to look brand new. You know, but it's a lot better condition now, and I can see where I'm working, and you know, makes the job that you're doing go along a lot easier. You know, just even the little parts. You know, just clean them up. So we're gonna try and assemble this back. Take a look at our gaskets here. And you want to kind of look at your gaskets. You know, you can see how they were mounted. You know, you can see the grooves and stuff. So when you go put them back together, you know, you put them on the same way you took them off. Make sure you get the gaskets in between the spacers, or the spacer. And, you know, just take a quick look at it. Make sure the grooves are going to line up. want to put it upside down either. You want, you know, chances are you can mount your carburetor upside down. You can go put it all back together, and you know, it's like that's not right. So it's gonna sit on the lawn tractor like this, and you have your kind of your bracket where this is gonna sit, you know, like that. You know, so it's easier to, when you're looking at it, you know, you got this bracket. It's always gonna be facing down towards the front of the tractor. If it's facing up, then you got it on wrong, and chances are you put your carburetor on wrong. So you just want to, you know, take a mental note of that. You got your carburetor here, you know, you're going to mount it like this. You know, this is the way that it's going to go. And you just, you know, just take your time here and, you know, line everything up. You know, it might take a minute. You know, it's, you got the carburetor, the gasket, the spacer, the gasket, and then the intake. You know, you're trying to put them all together to get one side started, and it'd be easier to line up the other side. You know, it's just a matter of getting it through all those parts. You know, do it like that, and then, you know, it's on the way that you need it. And then, you know, forget that. So, remember, like I said before, remember the way you took it off, so you can put it back on. You don't want to be struggling. Like that. Get your hardware started, at least one side, and work on the other side. Before you get it all put back together, you gotta look at, you know, make sure, like, see, right there, I have it on wrong. I hooked it up to the wrong link, because you want one where your choke cable is going to come through here, and there's going to be a tab sticking out. See? Don't have that tab sticking out in the proper direction, so now I got to take it back apart. You know, just, it's a simple thing. It's not, you know, it's not hard to do. It's just getting it all lined up the way that, you know. You can even test fit it before you put it back on. It's really only going to go on one way. So yeah, I test fitted it and made sure the direction that I wanted it to go. And you just take it on. And that's the way it's supposed to go. You know, it's like I said in the last video, adult Legos, you know. Except, you know, with this, there's only one way it can go. Or one way that it's supposed to go. You can put it on wrong, and you know, when you go to hook your cable back up, you realize that it's on wrong, and then you got to take it all apart. You know, with the choke lever though, it's easy, but you can take it off while on the machine. You know, it's not something that has to. You don't have to take the whole thing back apart. Once you got it where it needs to go, you just, you know, hand tighten everything first. You know, just get it all lined up and hand tight. You know, and you test it, make sure, you know, everything's moving freely. As you can tell, you see that tab that I was talking about, it's going to be sticking out the front because your cable is going to come through here. You can tighten it down with this nut, and then it's going to hook into this, and it's going to move this back and forth with your throttle. You know, you want to make sure that tab's sticking out when you move the choke lever. You know, there it goes, working the way that it's supposed to. You know, it moves freely. Alright, then we got this gasket right here. This goes on the face of the carburetor. Make sure you put this one on right too, because you know, you get this gasket, you see that little hole right there, and on the carburetor there's a little hole right there. So you know, when you go to put it on, you want to put it on like this. You know, there's no hole there, and you're, you know, essentially, you know, you're not covering it up, but it, you know, you're going to be drawing, you know, extra air or extra fuel in through there. So make sure when you put it on that, you know, the gasket where the hole is covering up the hole on the carburetor. And when you have that all set, you know, before you put the nuts and everything back on, you know, you take your, you know, in my case, it's a 4mm. Fits on there. You know, I would suggest getting a good torque spit set. About a 4 works fine for me. I just put it on there and you snug it down. You know, not super tight, but tight, so you know you won't get any air leaks. Once you have that all set, you take your part of your intake. I think there's a plenum, maybe. I'm not. It looks like a plenum, intake plenum. I don't know the correct terminology for it. No, I'm not. I'm not a mechanic by any means. You know, this is a hobby for me. You know, a lot of the stuff I just learned to do on my own, and you know, practice makes perfect. And I don't know like I said, I don't know the correct terminology on a lot of these parts, and I'm alright with that, you know. I'm not a mechanic, so don't do as I do. You know, this is more of entertainment purposes, not an official how-to. DIY, you know, let's get in there and tighten them down. Not super tight, you don't want to strip anything, but you want to get it nice and tight so, you know, you don't have any air leaks. And, you know, that's what your finished product will look like. So, when I took it off, it was quite dirty, you know, and now it's great shape, you know, I'm happy with it, and, you know, we'll get it mounted back to the machine. This carburetor back on the intake manifold, and I'm gonna pop it back on here real quick. make sure when you're putting it back on that you got your governor return spring and a throttle return spring. Not binding. Got good play, good movement. We have this throttle lug right here. You gotta hook this back up before you put it back, put the carburetor back on, or you're gonna take it all back off, put it back on. And you have 3/8 bolts. Hand tighten them. At least get the top ones in. And now you can do the bottom. There, hand tight. You're good to go. And as you can see, I'm not using a drill. My impact might snap these up and try to use an impact, so you can get in here with a short 3/8 with an extension. You don't have to worry about risking a strip, because then you're gonna have to tap it out. There's more headache, so that thing when you can't use an impact on some of the bigger stuff. But just, hand tight. It's snug, and then a little bit more. Got your fuel shut-off solenoid down here. And we can plug that back in. Just double check everything, make sure everything moves freely. That's looking good. Got the fuel line. Put that back on. You put your clamp on so you don't have any fuel leaks. So when you're said and done, this is finished product. You got the cover back on, intake and carburetor, everything's clean inside. Everything's connected and where it's supposed to. Everything works the way it's supposed to. Just take your time. No need to rush. You don't want to get to this point and then realize that you forgot to put something important back on, like maybe one of these, one of those rods you forget to put back on, and then you got to take everything back apart and start from scratch again. But yeah. Well, I want to thank you for watching me. Stay tuned. I have another video here shortly. We'll be working on a 19.5 opposed twin, and we'll get into that.